Greetings, folks. We're from Bigfatphoenix Interactive. We build video games that help kids develop social and emotional skills and critical life skills. Our first game is called Fairside Stories. We're available right now for free on the Google Play Store, and we will be available shortly on iOS. Do try the games and give us your feedback. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of the Bigfatpodcast, where we talk about all things at the intersection of games and learning. For today's episode, we have a couple of new folks from BFP joining us. So hey, I'm just going to let you guys introduce yourselves and then we'll get started with the talk.
Hey everyone, I'm Bhamini and I handle game design at Bigfatphoenix.
Hello, I'm Sameer and I handle narrative design at Bigfatphoenix. It is the structure of the story structure of the game in question. So the things the characters say, the choices they introduce, etc.
Thank you for that very academic and accurate description of what you do. Okay, cool. So today what we thought we'd talk about is that how games teach us things and help us learn things, sometimes in surprising and unexpected ways, and often without even trying to do so. And there are almost all games teach us something or the other, even games that are not explicitly made as learning games or as educational games, right? Just regular old games that we play for entertainment end up teaching us so much. So just going to start with a simple question. Have you, either of you, ever picked up an actual skill, a transferable real life skill of any sort by playing a video game?
I mean, that makes it sound a lot more formal than what I think I've picked up from video games. Because I've picked things up, but I don't know how well baked they are in the finished product. Like, for instance, one thing that video games have taught me or have given me the space to keep continually learn is how to suck at things, how to fail. Because I'm the kind of person who needs to get things right immediately and who needs to get things right. If I'm not good at a thing, I don't do the thing. But the thing is, I'm bad at most video games the first time around if they involve twitch skills, platforming, that kind of thing. Like, I won't play a sport in real life because I know I'm going to be crap at it. But a video game is a quiet space where no one can see me fail. So I can fail 100 times, but keep trying again and again and again, and then 100% Rayman Legends. So I think that's a skill. I mean, I still need to get it right eventually, but I don't need to give up the minute I'm awful.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's kind of interesting, right? Where you say that nobody is watching me fail unless you're in a 32-player Halo match or something where there's like some 11-year-old kid who's watching you fail. But in single-player games, that's pretty interesting, right? One of the things that we do know, documented evidences of games helping build resilience and confidence in a lot of skills. Happened to me with Metroid Dread. I'm, again, never been really good at Twitch games, and I don't pick up really difficult games. I'm not that guy. I don't play Dark Souls. I don't play Bloodborne, that kind of thing. But with Metroid Dread, the boss fights are really challenging, but the platforming between the boss fights is not. And it helped me build an appetite for games in which you die 20 times and try over again. And immediately after that, I've actually tried to do that. And guess what? I actually thought, hey, you know what? Maybe I should try learning a musical instrument. At least it put that thought in my head. I've not actually done it, and I don't know if I will, but it put that thought in my head. It's not a thought that I've ever had in my life after, I don't know, the age of 10 when I convinced myself that I sucked and had no musical talent. But oddly enough, Metroid Dread put the thought in my head of, hey, maybe you should just give it a shot. If you can beat Kraid or Ravenbeak, you can learn to play a keyboard. Shouldn't be that hard. Sameer?
So one of the things that sticks out for me is, so growing up, I was very bad with directions. Now I'm mediocre, but growing up, I was really bad. I would cycle to a friend's house and then take the wrong turn back home.
There will be several people in Chennai who will vouch for my superiority in that skill over yours. I'll take you on that someday. Sorry, go on.
So I was always struggle with that, and it became like a joke in the family and all, like, can you find your way to the kitchen and things like that. And that's around the time I started playing 2 games which stuck to me, and that was Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, then San Andreas later, and Need for Speed Underground 2. And in both those games, they had that free roam idea. And I spent a lot of time just roaming around there. And that's where the idea of checkpoints and a map was something I started to internalize. And I started using that in this idea of a checkpoint in real life became something that stuck to me. And that's how I would pick landmarks and understand them and just think of them almost in the same graphics as the games, and then slowly find my way back home. I don't think I became extremely good at it, but it's certainly something I got better at by playing these two games.
I'm just glad that after playing San Andreas or Vice City, the skill that you picked up from that game was map reading and navigation, which is heartwarming. But but
we don't recommend it for 11-year-olds. Those scary 11-year-olds should not be playing those.
I mean, they shouldn't be. But no, actually, I hear you, because map reading is again a skill that I wasn't as good at reading actual Google Maps. Forget about finding direction. Like learning how to read that kind of navigational system. Games like GTA and The Witcher actually did help me with that. Because early days of map reading, right? When Google Maps and locating a place through a map was just about becoming mainstream. And sometimes I wouldn't actually know how to look at that, where to turn and what to do. But it was pretty cool. I buy that.
I think the term, sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, I think I've heard of the term GPS for the first time in Underground 2. And in that, you physically turn on the GPS, like you have to turn it on, toggle it on and off. So that's where I found out what GPS is. So that is cool. Yeah,
no, that's super interesting, right? There's a lot of things I've seen. One of the things that an example that I can quote is this cousin of mine, he was all of 8 years old, and we were going go-karting. And he'd never been in a kart before. I was a little nervous because I was responsible. I was the adult and I was taking these kids out, and I was a little nervous about it. And he was like, no, I want to get in a go-kart by myself. And they had this go-kart where an adult can sit and the kid can sit and you can go. But he was like, no, I want to get in a kart by myself. And I was really nervous, but I said, you know what? Fine, just go for it. Jump in the kart. And this little kid has never handled a vehicle before in his life, right? Other than maybe a tricycle or something. He gets into a go-kart and he starts zipping around the track like a pro. And my eyes popped out. I was like, what's going on? And he just goes his entire run, and you get 20 minutes for 100 rupees or something like that. And he just pelts around the track like a seasoned driver. And then he comes out, pulls off his helmet, like post-race behavior, and he just walks up. And I'm like, where did you learn to drive? And he was like, video games. So I'm not even making this up. It was amazing, right? He got the motor skills and the road sense and all of that purely by being in simulators. Now, it blew my mind at the time. We know now that actually simulators are used to train people, right? Flight simulators, of course, is a known thing. And even for high-speed vehicles, they do use computer simulations, which pretty much behave like video games to teach people that kind of thing. So has any of you ever seen anyone else, like kids, or did you as a kid pick up some unexpected skill from a video game that you didn't know you had?
I got really good at punching my sister because of Road Rash. But hear me out. I thought it was awesome because at that time we were watching MotoGP. MotoGP had no women. But Road Rash had what were their names? Like Sydney and Rhonda the Rash and things like that. And these were badass hardcore chicks. So my sister and I didn't have any role models on MotoGP, but we did have them on Road Rash. Maybe not all their behavior should have been emulated, but...
I'm just happy you're compensating for Sameer's learning map reading from GTA. By learning how to punch your sister from playing Road Rash. But hey, skills are skill. We're not making judgment calls here on whether those skills are beneficial to society or not.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, right? It is skills, it's confidence, it's the ability to kind of do something, whether that's beat up your sister or read a map or try again or pick up a musical instrument. There are certain kind of muscles that games actually do help you build just by virtue of how they're structured and how they make you feel, right? So, there's also kind of interesting things that I would like to, talk about. One of the things, I want to mention a game that I played at some point. I think Bhamini told me about it, and it was on Apple Arcade. It's called Dear Reader. And it was this really wonderful little unusual game about where you actually have to quasi edit the classics, right? It would be a passage from Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn, or one of the classics, and there would be a passage, but you'd have to rearrange stuff and you'd have to put it together so that it made sense, right? And there's a lot of wonderful things going on there, right? One is that you're getting a sense of working with language, you're building actual explicit language skills, and God forbid you might become an editor and then keep, shitting on other people's work. But it actually helps you build that skill, and it simultaneously builds an interest in classical literature, right? It exposes people who might otherwise not think of picking up one of the classics and reading them, but it presents that in an interesting way that you might play that game and develop an interest in an art form that you otherwise may not have, or in a genre, or in something that you otherwise might not have been interested in. Anything like that? Any examples like that y'all want to talk about?
I mean, Overcooked comes to mind because Overcooked, if you haven't played it, is this fantastic co-op game where you're basically trying to put recipes together and get them out to service in as little time as possible, and you need to hit certain minimum values to move on to the next level. And it's a great co-op game because you get to yell at the person you're playing with. If the person you're playing with is me, you will be yelled at.
I feel like you actually moved on from actually punching the people that you're playing with, to just yelling at them. So I look forward to the next 5 years.
But there's value in that, right? Because Overcooked, firstly, it's a very communication-oriented game. So you need to be able to communicate with the person you're playing with if you need to get the job done. And if you watch like MasterChef and you watch actual kitchens, they're constantly yelling at each other about the status of where things are at. Like, eggs are up, like spaghetti is ready, like they're constantly communicating. So that's the same way you have to play in Overcooked. So you're kind of like developing that skill as you play in this fake little like video game world. But also you're learning a bunch of the recipes, or at least very, very high level things that go together, and like tools that are used in the kitchen. Like on Valentine's Day, Ani and I went to a hibachi grill, a Japanese hibachi grill. And my first thought when we sat down at it was, oh my God, this is just like the one in Overcooked. Because until that point, my only reference was Overcooked. And I learned that things were made on a hibachi through that game.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting, right? In terms of games, giving you a sense of an environment or giving you some idea of something before you actually experience it. Happened to me multiple times. I remember the first time I went to the United States and as an adult, and I landed in San Francisco, and I was driving in the cab from the airport to the hotel, and all I could think of was, man, the GTA guys just nailed it, right? In terms of how the place actually looked, and the modeling is surprising. I gained a great appreciation for GTA after actually walking around in the United States, because the way they've actually modeled it is remarkable. It also meant during the same trip, we went to Lake Tahoe and a couple of other all game developers. And when we were traveling around, all we could look around was say, hey, it's exactly like Skyrim, or it's just like Red Dead Redemption, which is like kind of sad. But yeah, for sure, right? It's interesting how a game can model an environment and simulate an environment, and you kind of give you a sense of what that would actually be like. Whether it's a relatively realistic game like a Forza Motorsport or a GTA, or a far more abstract game like Overcooked, it still nails the experience.
Yeah.
Sameer, you want to kind of toss something in the ring?
Yeah, like just speaking to what you just mentioned, and it made me think of the Tycoon games, where growing up, like if somebody had told me that, okay, would you be excited about running an airport or like an amusement park? I would probably be like, yeah, maybe. But just looking at those games, I was totally into playing those games. And I remember, like you said, like, even Overcooked has a fun way of looking at a very familiar world. And it makes me think of the intro to School Tycoon, where like a lot of different people are coming and complaining to the principal, and they're like, you should do this. And like, so sorry, I'm going to start that again. So in the intro to School Tycoon, you have people coming in and just complaining about the school. And they're like, if I rule the school. And the intro ends with the principal looking at you and saying, okay, you rule the school. And that's where the game starts. And then you have to set up toilets, like from the boring parts to the interesting parts of the whole school. You have to set it up and manage the kids' moods and your budget and things like that. And that was just like, I didn't think I would enjoy running a school so much, but playing School Tycoon like convinced me otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's Tycoon games and business simulation games are actually a great example of that sort of thing, right? You learn a whole lot. Those are complex games, and you learn a whole lot of stuff from messing around with those systems, because the interlocking systems, the fiction, it kind of gives you a broader perspective of what actually goes into running that kind of business, right? And sometimes that can be quite surprising, the kind of effects, the things that you need to think about. Like a child might not actually think about the fact that the school needs to worry about a budget, or the number of toilets is like really important, or how far the sick room is from the classrooms. And these are all like really important things that those kind of games actually do really well. And they're remarkably effective at giving you an appreciation for and an understanding of the kind of complexities involved in what you might otherwise think is a fairly straightforward or boring activity, right? Like the only thing I learned from Europa Universalis or Crusader Kings 3 is that I'm not smart enough to play those games, because those are like, I'm sure I could actually probably run Europe more efficiently than I could play Europa Universalis. But yeah, no, absolutely. I wanted to kind of also touch on something that Bhamini mentioned on Overcooked, right? As being a cooperative game. Cooperative games, again, are by nature fantastic at kind of building those kind of skills, right? Like you said, communication, which doesn't mean you only have to yell at people, but sometimes you have to be able to listen to people yelling at you and just do what they say, right? Because remember that when Bhamini and Ani were playing Overcooked, there's one person at the other end listening to being yelled at and doing stuff, right? So there's multiple things. So someone who's the leader who's barking orders and saying you do this and do that, and then there are people who are just kind of getting stuff done, and there's that whole dynamic which co-op games work really well. Recently I was just playing It Takes Two for a while. It's remarkable. It's such an elegant design. I didn't care for the fiction, it was a little bit on the nose, but let's move past that and look at the mechanics. It was remarkable. You really have to work together. You got to cooperate. You got to like really kind of do stuff, because it's a fundamentally cooperative game. You cannot play it in one player, right? It is meant specifically for two players. And what it does is it kind of opens up a whole bunch of things that you need to experience, right? In terms of communication, in terms of shared excitement and joy at a discovery, and saying, oh my God, yeah, that's what we need to do. Or support. Hey, you're not able to do that. Fine, you do this, I'll do that, right? There's a lot of dynamics going on there, which are actually super useful. If only we could reflect and say, hey, that's what I did in the game, right? And kind of be conscious of actually what kind of things you did in the game. That can be actually super useful for people, children and adults alike, right? And if you just watch anybody playing a cooperative game.
In fact, if you watch kids play single player games, they end up being cooperative most of the time if there's more than one kid in there. Like I've seen 2-3 kids sitting in the same place and everyone is telling their kid, no, go on the left, go on the right. In fact, going back to Road Rash, if you grew up in the 90s, you would have had only one computer if you were lucky enough to have one computer. So my sister would have like the directions and I would have the shift key to do the punching. That's why that was my favorite thing, right?
Yeah.
So, like we had one PlayStation when we finally got a PlayStation, one controller. So you got really good at making everything cooperative. So, and video games are a great way to explore that skill.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting, right? Even like a lot of the really early single player games, because of the same problem that Bhamini said, right? Of, hey, here's one computer and this awesome game and everybody just sits around and plays it together. right? Which is interestingly brought back by things like Twitch Plays Pokemon and Twitch Plays Mario and stuff like that, right? Where they've taken that idea and moved it to a huge scale in a different way. But essentially, single player games being played cooperatively is also like a really cool exercise in how a group of people can actually solve problems in more, forget effective, right? More fulfilling and fun ways. Because it's a joy to play with more people and, kind of arrive at that. And then you're like, when you finally win or you solve that puzzle or you crack that level, and then it's like, yeah, man, you can share that experience with other people. And that's really super powerful. Sameer, you played any interesting co-op games?
One very recently, in fact, for me, Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time.
Oh, Lads, never fails. Never fails. Go on. I'm just going to let you talk about Lads for the rest of the podcast. That's if there's one game that we should talk about.
Yeah, and it was again just by chance, like we were with some BFP people only, and Bhavna, our product manager, she was like, okay, I want to play this with people. And
Bhavna's going to kill you that you called her a product manager, but sure, go on.
She said, I want to play this with people. And I didn't quite catch what the appeal is about playing with other people. And we finally got a chance to play it. And I can't imagine anybody like not enjoying playing that. Like, it's just so good. Like it requires the right amount of communication between players, coordination. You can switch roles anytime. And it was just delightful. And like, it was what an experience just playing that together. And I want to try this. Okay, I'm going to try shooting. I want to drive. I want to do this. Go here, go there. Just
my favorite is always Shields. I'm always on Shields.
Right.
Yeah, but Lads, Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time is often a game that I often use when we do workshops with kids. I used to, for a long time, even before BFP, I used to do this workshop with kids where we get a bunch of kids and parents in a room and get them to play video games and talk about what is happening there. And Lads is a classic example. You can actually watch a group of kids play and clearly sort of see the dynamics that are happening. They're helping each other. They're cooperating. When someone's not good, someone else is helping. They're communicating. Someone sometimes takes responsibility and says, don't worry, I'll take that. You take this. You can see leadership. You can see collaboration. You can see teamwork. It's a remarkable game. And I believe it's actually essential. I feel like everybody should play it. There was also, Bhamini, you want to talk about, there was that really cool game that we played once, which was a cooperative puzzle solving game. Do you remember that one?
Right. It was called something TikTok or something?
TikTok. It was in fact called TikTok. That was right. I forgot about it.
No connection to the app. Yeah. TikTok was this really cool game that Anand and I were playing where it was like an adventure point and clicky puzzle solving game, but the information that Anand had on his end was completely different from the information that I had on my end. So we had to get on a phone call and communicate and collaborate with each other in order to solve each puzzle as we went along the way.
And there's no internet connection. That's what fried our mind. Because we're like, where's the invite friend and where's all the lobby and all of that? Actually, there is no communication between. You just need to say, I'm player 1 and you're player 2. You make that choice at the beginning and the content shown to you is different, right? So there is no internet connection required.
And so you have to, the game forces you to get on the phone. Or what, like maybe whatever the kids these days are doing. So, it's just another way that the games are pushing you together rather than pushing you apart.
Yeah, no, it's a remarkable kind of game. I think during that same period, we played a lot of cool games in that period. I remember this thing called the Westport Independent.
The newspaper game.
Yeah, it was a game. It was sort of like in the Papers, Please school of design, where there was like a game in which you edit a newspaper and you choose what stories, and the same story, how a headline can be used to represent the same story in different ways, and how you put things in order, and that would then influence what happens in the society. And I think it was set with you were in some totalitarian regime and you had to keep the government happy, but at the same time you had to do what's right and stuff like that.
And different factions respond differently, different parts, geographies of your town.
Yeah, right. There was the rich people quarter and the workers quarter, and you had to kind of think about all that. And it was actually, I thought, a very effective and really interesting experience that shed light on how news media actually works and the importance of actually news and how that impacts different sections of society and the pressures acting on a news organization. It was fantastic, and I can think of no better way to get young children understand how the news media works than a game like that, right? Anybody want to talk about Kentucky Route Zero? I thought we should sneak in Kentucky Route Zero for no reason at all.
Actually, there's a great reason to sneak it in, I would think. The story is in the telling of the story. That's a skill to learn by itself. Like there is very rarely a one fixed version of reality. The way you choose, the choices you make, and the way you choose to tell your story are what shape the world and reality you live in. Very, very, very meta. But Sameer and I do have master's degrees in media and cultural studies, so I think that we're allowed to go on that trip.
Yeah, and punch people and learn how to read maps from GTA. I mean, yeah, sure. Whatever it is you learned in college, it's clearly there's a connect. Yeah, it's paying off. But no, it's interesting. You should say that, right? With something like a Kentucky Route Zero, that you could just do so many things, because it's remarkable the way it does its storytelling. In the fact that there are certain things aspects of the story that are only in your head, that do not exist actually in the game. You can tell yourself the story that you want in Kentucky Route Zero, right? And it has no impact on actual gameplay, but it has huge impact on your experience of the game, right? And that's just something that's. Did you ever get around to finishing it, Sameer?
No, I didn't get, I think I pace it out. It gives too much for me to, it's I take a few months and absorb it and I get back to it. But I strongly agree with what you said, what both of you said about allowing the story to build itself in your head. And it's done in so many subtle ways. It's such a slow game. It's like they force you to take the time to absorb it. With just like the walk of the characters, the movement, like it forces you to slow down. And like a video game doing that is I thought it was unimaginable, but like fortunately that the game showed me the path quite literally.
Yeah, even it does a lot of the extra content between the episodes in Kentucky Route Zero for me was actually among the best parts of the game. There was this bit called the barfly where you're just sitting at a bar and watching a play. That's all you do throughout the game. I'm not sure if you all have Bhamini, if you've played it. Yeah. It's extraordinary, right? And it just talks, it's an experience of just observing and not controlling, which is actually antithetical to how games typically work, right? Games typically give you agency by letting you control what's happening. But in Kentucky Route Zero, the agency is in your experience of what is happening anyway. How do you interpret that? That's where your agency lies. You do not actually change things that happen in the game, right? So it's actually a super interesting way to kind of explore that idea of, hey, there are things that you can change. There are things that you can't change, but you can change the way you relate to the things that do happen, right? Which just got a lot deeper than I thought it would. But hey, that's how we sometimes roll. So is there, any other kind of, one of the other aspects I wanted to kind of touch upon and maybe, get you guys to talk a little bit about it was, I'll start with my experience, right? With my son when he was little, used to play a lot of Halo. And Halo and video games in general sparked for him an interest in art and an interest in music, right? Which actually sprung from, because video games contain all of these things, right? Like when you play a game like a Halo, like a well-produced and a large game, or any really good game for that matter, it contains all of those things, right? Typically art, music, writing, storytelling. And he developed an interest in music. He used to learn how to play he picked up how to play the Halo theme and the Skyrim theme. I think he might be the only kid in India who played the Skyrim theme in 5th standard on his school. I can see Bhamini tensing up a little bit, but we'll let that slide. But
your son should be friends with Ani.
Yeah, totally. So, everybody should be friends with Anand. But yeah, so he kind of, it is not anything explicitly that he learned from the game, but the fact of beautiful music in a game, or beautiful art in a game, or beautiful storytelling in a game, just sparking an interest in that sphere or in that field of activity, right? Which I thought was really interesting and powerful as an experience for me when I saw my son doing that. Anything in that nature you all have seen, experienced, witnessed?
So one of a mobile game that I can think of, I played it many years ago, but I'm relating to it very strongly now. It was called Game Dev Story. I don't know.
Hey, Game Dev Story is one of my favorites. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is just like a lot of the things about that game I'm understanding now, the debugging and all of that. But I still enjoyed playing it then. And it is like
that bar that just fills up, ding, 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 bugs. Yeah.
And like I never got it. Like I feel like I grasped it, but it got me, like it stuck to my head. So that's like, so I figured out what it was, and I understand the gravity of it now. But like somewhere subconsciously, it built an interest inside my head, which eventually like manifested itself in different ways, perhaps. But it introduced me to a whole new world. When I downloaded Game Dev Story, I wasn't even sure it was about like game development. I think somebody downloaded it for me. I don't know how it ended up.
You thought it was Game Dev.
Yeah, perhaps.
Right.
But yeah, so that was like I'm loving thinking about Game Dev Story now. Like, and I feel like it started like years ago. So that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think there are some games that explicitly do drive you to be interested in aspects like Carmen Sandiego. Like it got me really interested and aware of certain types of geographies. But even games like 80 Days, even though there's a slight fictionalized reinterpretation of history, it is such an interesting exploration of a certain geographical route that you're traversing across the world.
80 Days is an absolute masterpiece. And I know you keep talking about it in pretty much every conversation. Bhamini will refer to 80 Days, and with good reason. It's 80 Days is extraordinary. And games like that, we do know history, geography, those kind of things. Many games have been documented to, do that well. Civilization, Crusader Kings and Europa Universalis for people who are smart enough to be able to get past the tutorials of those games. 80 Days was really cool. Anything by Inkle for that matter. Overboard is cool. If you want to learn how to murder somebody and get away with it, Overboard is awesome.
And also, like less intellectual skills also. Just Dance got me through the first years of the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Like without that game, like it taught me to have fun, let loose, and learn how to dance very badly. Granted, only in my living room. But it really sparked an interest in certain types of things that I didn't even know were dance, because kids these days are doing these things. But
those are like absolutely remarkable, right? Just Dance. I remember when we got the Kinect early on, the only real use for it was the dance games, Dance Central and Just Dance, and it was just so amazing that we could just sit and dance, and it removes it. Not everybody, actually dances. I think everybody likes to dance, but not everybody actually dances. And these are games in which you can actually just dance. You just dance. It's fantastic. And all of those, even the Guitar Hero, that school of games, it lasted. It was a long-ish fad, but when it lasted, it helped people like me with no musical talent to experience the act of playing music, even if it was just rhythm, right? When you had games like Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and you could actually, get those instruments and feel like a rock star. Or things like Elite Beat Agents and, more simple rhythm games and dance games were absolutely remarkable tools for getting you out of your comfort zone and just letting loose, and having that experience is not possible without, it's very difficult without the space of a video game. I think come back to what Bhamini started the conversation off with, right? That games just create this magic circle, this safe space in which you can just try stuff that you wouldn't otherwise do, whether that is punching your sister or dance or playing a musical instrument or editing one of the classics or reading a classic story or attempting to run a business. These are things which you can do in games without the fear of failure, and in a private space, if that space can be as private or as public as you want it to be. you can let in someone, you can let in your close friends or family if you want to share that space. Or if you're not comfortable, you can do it alone. But the space is there. And you can experiment with stuff. You can try things that you otherwise wouldn't try. You can experience things that you otherwise wouldn't experience. I can listen to classical music and try to appreciate it in a game without having the need to sound smart about it and talk to people saying, I understand this, right? Or I can try to drive a car really fast and win a race without, worrying about dying, for example, right? Just so many things that you can do in games. And we all know that that's where learning lives. Learning lives in a space where you can try, fail, figure out without fear, and then try again, right? That's fundamentally where it works. And I think there's really no need for us to be convincing people that video games are good at this. But I would like to kind of encourage people, if you're listening, if you're a parent, if you're a kid, or if you're anyone at all listening to this who doesn't really experiment or explore much with games, or just think about games as, something you do in your spare time or frivolous entertainment, I would like to encourage or invite you to try stepping out of your comfort zone, try some games which help you learn something new, and you'd be surprised at how effective that would be. But hey, thanks so much for showing up, Bhamini, Sameer. It's been fantastic. I think we're all out of time, and I think Sameer needs to bounce out to some Shivaji birthday celebration or some such thing. So we're going to let you go. But thank you so much for showing up, and let's do more of this quite often. All right.
Thanks for having us, Anand.
Thanks, Anand. This was fun. Good fun.